Okay, well, let's get started then. So old world versus new world means two things. Um, Traditionally and originally, it meant that wines from the old world as opposed to wines from the new world. So wines from Europe and the old established winemaking regions as opposed to wines from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, California, South America, and so forth. And so that those are the terms as they developed. But what happened over time was the I blame it more on Robert Parker and the speculator than anything else. And they started really liking wines that were produced in a very soft style. They would judge 100 wines a day, and palate fatigue is real. And what happened was those wines with really high alcohol and real low acidities would just pop out with heavy palate fatigue. And that became known as the New World style. And we'll go through examples of it. But and then that New World style it went to the Old World, and a wine consultant in France in Bordeaux, Michel de Roland, had figured out that real high pH, flabby, high alcohol stylings, and started getting the French people to make it because they got 100-point scores from Parker. And so he became very wealthy by copying this style. So now New World, Old World isn't just New World and Old World. It's becoming more two different styles as opposed to two different places. And so that's the most confusing concept because people think, well, wait a second, how can you get New World wine out of France? What do they call it? The one with a hippopotamus on it, fat bitch or something like that. That's a New World style wine that comes out of France. Do you know what it's called, Molly?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Fat bastard.
What is it?
Fat bastard.
Fat bastard. There we go. And but anyway, so that's what's happening, and I think it's been a real disservice to the industry that Parker and the Spectator have really endorsed these wines that are not friendly with food at all. And being European trained, you can see in the middle of there, Germany, that's where I was born and went to winemaking school in the Rhineland-Pfalz. I was born in Franken, which is a little more in the Bavaria area. But so I tend to make the Old World style wines in California in the New World. So it just becomes very confusing, but that's really what's going on. The area that makes the best New World style wines is Lodi, California. And Lodi used to drive into Lodi down Highway 99, either from the south or the north, and the signs all said the home of Tokay, and Lodi had all these beautiful big Tokay vines, these ancient vines that were really amazing. And Tokay was used as a table grape until Thompson Seedless became popular because Tokay has seeds. And so a lot of those vineyards, they also had a lot of Zinfandel, and they kept their old vineyards Zinfandel and then planted more Zinfandel in Cabernet and all kinds of other stuff. And they're still a huge producer of wine, but now the signs all say the home of Zinfandel or the capital of Zinfandel or something like that. What happened was they were able to add an additive that was created back in the early 80s called Mega Red or Mega Purple. And Molly's going to show you a demonstration. I don't know if you want to do that now or you want to do that later, Molly.
We can do that now, whatever works for you.
Okay, what it does is it's ink. It's at 68% sugar, and it's just unbelievably black. It's a concentrate made from grapes, from grape varieties that run red juice, and it just turns beautiful claret style Zinfandel into inky wine. And what Parker and the Spectator really like is what they rate high are black wine. The blacker it is, the higher they rate it, and the softer it is, and the more it smells like this mega red, the higher they rate it. So Molly's going to explain what she's doing here.
So what I have is actually 2 glasses of our 2019 Rosé of Barbera, because it's really easy to see it, especially in a medium like this. And the first thing I'm going to do, you'll notice in the Jana glass on the right, you'll see I'm going to add 1 drop of this mega red, and you'll see how quickly it changes color. These were poured straight out of the bottle, so this is the color that our rosé normally is, but you can see how dark that comes out in just a single drop will change that color very drastically.
So the artistic background is a tea cloth.
I tried to get the wrinkles out, but so you can see right there, you can see how much that color has already changed. The left is completely unaltered, that's straight out of the bottle, and the right has just a single drop of that mega red. And in those glasses, that's probably about a 2 or 3 ounce pour in there, because those are big glasses. So in probably somewhere between 50 and 100 mils of wine, 1 drop changes it so drastically. And then I thought, well, I might as well do a second drop just to see what that does. So you'll see I add a second drop, and you can see how inky it is as soon as it hits that wine. And so when we add, because we will add a little bit of this to some of our blends, and when we add it, we're looking at a fraction of a milliliter in a sample size, even a little bit bigger than this. So we're looking at a teeny tiny amount when we're going to add it. But you can see there what a huge difference that makes between our unaltered on the right or on the left and the altered on the right.
It's we produce 2 wines that go somewhat in the New World direction. One is this Winemaker's Reserve Zinfandel, which we originally made for a single account in the state of Pennsylvania, and they wanted more of that New World style. And the other is in our One Last Kiss bread. And what we're doing, I can go halfway to the New World style. I can't go all the way. So I can go and add a little bit of this mega red and so forth, but I can't get that acidity way down, and or the pH way down up. I just can't go that far. I just can't drink the wine, but I can with a little bit of the mega red in it, and to give it a little bit of the flavor profile, but not that acidity profile. I don't think that the New World style is a bad style. It's just a style I don't like to make, and I don't want to drink with food. I think it's a perfect style of wine for the American public. I think Lodi does a fabulous job. Clinker Brick, the 7 Deadly Zins, both those guys are winemaker buddies of mine. And I think they've done a great job creating a wine for the American palate. The American palate grew up drinking Pepsi or Coca-Cola, And this is a wine that works, it fits that flavor profile, that the New World wines. They're not wines that you can have with dinner because they overpower the food. And so they're wines that should be consumed by themselves. And they're what I call walk around wines. So if you're just walking around at a party or something, it's fine because unless you're having some hors d'oeuvres, then it just overpowers them. So there is a place for New World style wine. It's just that I really like the wine to tell its story. And what Molly and I try to do is lock the story of the wine in the bottle. So this Zinfandel needs to say, I'm Zinfandel. It needs to taste like Zinfandel. When you pick grapes over ripe for Old World style, then you lose that varietal character because raisins tend to taste like raisins. It doesn't matter whether you grow them in Napa or Lodi or anywhere. Once they get to that raisin stage, they taste like raisins. And then the Mega Red overpowers it as well. So Zinfandels, the way they were made in California back in the 50s and 60s, they were called the Claret of California red wine. And you'll find that our Zinfandels have more of that claret coloring too, because we're not adding that Mega Red. So
Scott, so why do you add Mega Red to One Last Kiss and not Forte?
Well, Forte is already has plenty of color. It's port, so I don't add any Mega Red to the Forte. But
no, not to the Forte, but to the One Last Kiss.
Yeah, the reason is that I wanted to have some of that that New World profile flavor because that's the demographic we're aiming it at. Now the incinerator in the One Last Kiss are the same blend to start with. The same. Molly and I'll make a blend up of Zinfandel and Syrah, and maybe some Petit Syrah or something else to make that base blend, and then the incinerator is sweetened to about 0.8% using the Forte, and that's what Jan is referring to. The One Last Kiss is sweetened to about 2% using a combination of Mega Red and regular red concentrate. So that's the difference between the two. And it's amazing to taste the wine side by side because they're very, very different when 99% of them are the same wine. It's just the different in addition. The Forte gets about a 4% addition of Forte, where the concentrate addition is minuscule, but you can see what it did in Molly's demonstration there. Didn't take much, you know, to really bring it up.
I think this is an interesting question, Scott, from Donald. He is wondering what is the percentage of Zins you think in Amador that are old versus New World?
From Amador County, I would say about 80% of them are still Old World style. Now they may be adding a little bit of the Mega Red to darken them up, but they still have that high acidity and not that real low acidity that you would get out of Lodi. Amador County is a mountain appellation, and high elevation grape growing just naturally preserves a lot of acidity in the wine. Hi, Alan. I see you showed up. It's nice.
So do we want to talk about Molly's experience?
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of experience, especially with Scott, of making Old World style wines, but not a lot of experience actually working in the Old World as far as a region. I was born and raised here in California. I went to school down on the Central Coast at Cal Poly and kind of worked and fell in love with the wine industry down there. And then I moved to New Zealand, and I lived in New Zealand for about a year making wine. And working for wine companies. I was actually up on the North Island for most of my time, but it was interesting there, and because we were still in kind of hill country up there and really granitic soils, very similar to what we have soil-wise up here in Amador. So we were still developing a decent amount of acidity, particularly New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are usually have that really bright acidity character. And so that was what I saw more was more technology based as far as New World. We were doing things that we weren't even doing in California to some of that New Zealand wine. It was very interesting. Some of our pre-fermentation tools and tricks that we were doing there. Then after the year that I spent in New Zealand, I went and spent a harvest in South Africa. That's that second, the right-hand side of that picture that you're seeing now. I was in a region called Stellenbosch, which is right outside of Cape Town. This is the Western Cape of South Africa, and you can see it's pretty condensed as to where they can grow wine there. And where I was at the time the highest elevation vineyard in all of South Africa. Was on the side of what's known as the Heidelberg Mountain. So I've had a lot of experience working in foothill and mountain wine regions. And I think those tend to lend themselves to a little bit more of that old world style, particularly in the alcohol content, because a lot of times either it's going to be really late to harvest something that's going to produce a really high alcohol, because to get that you want to have really high sugars. And it also lends itself to that really crisp, clean acidity. Some of those really low pH numbers, that really bright character that really helps to put the fruit forward. And like Scott was saying, where it really shows a sense of place. It helps to tell the story of the vineyard, the particular location of where those wines are coming from. So that's kind of my experience. And then after South Africa, I moved back to California, and I've been working in kind of the foothills of this area for 6 or 7 years now, with Scott for 5. So it's been good. A lot of foothills and a lot of mountains. And I don't think I realized that till just now, that I've pretty much only spent time in either hill country or more mountainous regions in my winemaking history. And I've made some pretty incredible wines in my career. I've at least had a hand in it. So that's something I feel very fortunate about.
And the one thing, you don't have to deal with the baboons like you did in South Africa.
Exactly. That was one of the things I emailed one of my professors after I finished my harvest in South Africa. And I said, in our entire vineyard pest management course, we went over gophers, we went over different types of snakes, different types of insects and mildews, but you didn't cover baboons. And so we had to be on the lookout for baboons out in the vineyard, because they're notorious for coming in and ripping grapes off their clusters. Yeah. And my professor just kind of laughed at me. So it is what it is.
So Janet, you have the slide with the scale on it. Bring that one up. And so I want, well, this one works too, but the scale. That's okay. This is fine. Let's go through this one. Old World isn't necessarily light body, but it's not as heavy bodied as New World. Old World can still have lots of body and lots of character, where New World will have just kind of a clobbering, pruny, plummy, inky kind of body. The biggest difference, that big difference, and then the other difference is acidity. We keep mentioning this. Old World just has naturally high acidity because it's a food wine. So when you've taken 2 or 3 bites of your meal, and the flavors and fats have built up in your mouth so that you're no longer craving them, wine allows you to cleanse your palate because of the acidity and it washes those fats out of your mouth so that the next bite of your meal tastes like that first bite again. So that's what wine is for, is to keep that first bite character throughout the meal. If you have no acidity in the wine, then it competes with the meal because it isn't cleansing your palate at all. And then the last one's alcohol. Our Zinfandels tend to be 14.8% alcohol, which is a good level for ripeness of Zinfandel in Amador County. Our Napa Cabernet is only 13.5. If you get much over 13.5, then it loses its varietal character. So every region and every variety has its alcohol level that helps you tell the story best. But with New World, they want those really, really raisined grapes, so they just get that real jammy character, and that's all you get. And so those are the three things that describe the difference. So when people buy our wine, if they like New World style wine, I don't want them buying our wine because they're going to be disappointed. So the best thing to do is educate them on the label as to what they're getting. When I became a member, or one of the founding members of the International Riesling Foundation, the first thing we did was create a sweetness scale from dry to sweet with 4 different points in it, so that the Riesling drinker that liked what most Americans like, a 2% Riesling, could see where the marker is on the scale, and that's what they would get. But I, again, make dry Riesling, and so if somebody likes that 2% Riesling or that medium style Riesling, I don't want them buying my wine because they're going to be disappointed. But if they're looking for a nice, crisp European style or German style Riesling at 9.5, 10.5% alcohol, then it's on the scale. It tells them that. So from there, I said, we got to be able to do that with this New World, Old World. And so this is what we came up with. Well, because New World, Old World terms are very confusing, with the next bottling, we're going to show, we've changed the scale. And I'm going to put this up here where you can see what it says there. It says overly jammy and elegant. And so we're changing the Old World with the term elegant, and we're changing the New World with the term overly jammy. Hopefully that'll be less confusing to the customer. So that'll be on 2018 red wines, which are still in tank, so are in barrel actually. They won't be bottled for a while. Especially since of this, because of the COVID thing, we can't do any bottling right now because we can't put 10 people a foot apart in a bottling line in a truck without any social distancing. So we'll wait until we open back up, and then we'll hopefully be selling lots of wine and have the equity needed for bottling, which is a very expensive process, and also not get anybody sick. So anyway, is there any questions?
So I can see a couple of questions here. Brian wants to know, since there are three of us who make the 1869 Zinfandel up here in Amador County, and there's one producer down in Lodi. Does the Lodi winery make the 1869 more New World or more Old World style?
New World. That's Macchia Winery. Macchia Winery does not get the old vines. It gets a section of vineyard that was actually planted in probably 75. I guess most people could call that old vine these days. I don't call it old vine unless I can, if I can remember when the vineyard was planted, I don't call it old vine. The rest of the vineyard was planted in 1860s, and I don't remember that being planted. But anyway, they make that they get that section ripens up riper than the older vines at the same period of picking, and they get that section and they make it into a New World style. And their winery is very successful and does a very good job at making New World style wines. Yeah.
And then I know we talked a little bit about the percentage, the alcohol percentage for old world style winemaking. Is there a percentage level on the alcohol that we would consider New World? Or is it, I tend to think of it more as a combination of higher alcohol and that higher pH combined, but is there a number on a scale that we can kind of say it changes from old world to New World style?
It's more with pH than it is with alcohol, and it's more with ripeness of grapes. I mean, you can still have grapes that are ripe but not overripe, and the wine will still end up being 16%. It all depends on the vintage and so forth. But most of the time, the New World is 17% in that range, and it's a little bit of a stuck fermentation. They'll let it up to the point where the alcohol fills the yeast, and then that way they end up with this sweet style wine. But it's the acidity, I think, that the acidity and the jammy character, that overripe character, are really what denote that New World style.
And then it looks like we've got another question. Is there anything specific that we look for in the vineyard that would indicate the grapes are more inclined to make old world style wines versus New World style?
Raisins. I mean, it's just percentage of raisins. Zinfandel is an uneven ripener. And so on the same bunch of grapes, you'll have green berries, complete raisins, and everything in between, what I call golf balling, where they're just starting to dimple up. So Zinfandel winemaking it really requires a lot of walking through the vineyard every year, year after year, and eating the grapes. And by watching it, you can kind of tell. What happens also in Amador County is that we don't irrigate our vineyards, and they're what we call dry land farmed, and you're in a mountain region. And so there isn't a lot of moisture in the ground. And at the end of the season, the Zinfandel vine will pull moisture out of its own fruit to keep itself alive. So you'll have this premature shriveling or raisening, or it actually starts out as golf balling. And then, but the grapes aren't ripe. You don't have ripe flavors. And I always say the best Zinfandel in Amador County is made after the first rain. So we'll get a rain, an early rain, or a bunch of dewy mornings. That's enough to do it. And the leaves suck up that moisture, and it goes right back into the fruit, and the berries just plump right back up. And then the second time when they start golf balling again, you want to catch it, because now you'll have ripe flavors. The cell structure in the skins is expanded and contracted and expanded, and you end up with a breaking down in the cell structure a little bit, so that when you hit those ripe flavors and you make the wine, you get good flavors and good extraction. But if you let it go past that, where you have too much of the raisening, then the wine just becomes jammy and plummy, and you lose that flavor of Amador County and of Zinfandel.
And I've noticed too that usually after that first rain, we start seeing those cool nights, which during the summertime, it stays warm. And when we start getting those cool nights, that's when you start to see more of that acid development. So as the fruit is ripening and getting those nice ripe flavors, you're still developing a really nice acidity. So you're seeing those kind of merging together. And and that lends itself towards that old world style as well.
Yeah, and the only way to figure that out is to just walk through the vineyard and eat the grapes. You know, it's like when you're in a grocery store and you're looking at peaches and you see that real hard green peach, you can't smell it. It's just, it's just there. And then you get to the ripe peach where it comes right off the pit and you can smell the peaches, and that it's just it smells ripe and tastes ripe. And then you get to the overripe where it starts turning brown and it loses that nice, beautiful, ripe character. Well, it's the same thing when we're walking through the vineyard. We're eating those grapes to see where the average berry, on those uneven bunches of grapes is. When back in 1995, I left Amador County and went to Napa Valley to run a winery for one of my mentors, Dr. Peterson, a winery called Folie à Deux. And I got my first load of Cabernet, which came from the Screaming Eagle vineyard in Napa Valley. And as I dumped the grapes into my hopper, I looked at them and I go, every grape's the same. They're all the same. Every grape is the same sugar. There's no uneven ripening. I go, no wonder people like to make wine here,
There's less of a challenge. There's a lot less guessing that it's going to be good, which is why we go out and sample and taste, and you try to pull a sampling that's going to be representative of the vineyard, is because up here, especially like Scott was saying, within a cluster, the grapes aren't the same, let alone from vine to vine. You can see some wild differences, but what you're looking for is that nice average of what is this going to look like when it's all together. And so to have a vineyard like the Screaming Eagle vineyard, where it's all ripe all at once, that sounds like a cakewalk.
It made some nice wine. I see Chef Brian that you came on. I don't see your picture, but Chef Brian is part of the wine team at the winery here. He's been in a number of these events that we've had. Brian, do you want to, or can you talk? I don't know if you can bring him up or not, about the food pairings with old world versus new world style wines.
Hey there, Scott. Well, it's as from a chef's point of view, it's no fun to work with old new world wines. You hit it on the nail there. That the problem is when you're producing food with what I call flabby fruit wines, they totally fight with each other. So you just get tired of it quick. You get tired of the wine, you get tired of the food. And it's pretty basic, very, very basic. But I did have a question I sent it to Jana for my own personal, and certainly I would consider myself an educated wine professional. I hadn't really thought about this, but what are the examples of New World and Old World white wines? It's kind of a different spectrum.
Well, New World white wines are, again, much higher pH than standard white wines, and they tend to again be very heavy. I have a big problem with New World whites. They're just so clunky and heavy. If I get a bottle of it, they tend to be over oaked and
right. You're talking about Chardonnay then.
Yeah, Chardonnay, and I immediately put in about 25% water to get it down, and then on my kitchen table I have salt and pepper for my food. I also have a little vial of tartaric acid in liquid solution, 100 grams and 100 milliliters, and I use that like salt on my meat. I just drop some acid into the damn wine until I can get that brightness back into it. I've gone as far as using lemon juice in a restaurant when I didn't have my little vial of acid with me. But it's just unfortunate. It just ruins the wine, and it's so hard to drink. The pH values that tell us that 3.6 pH is the turning point. When you start getting at 3.8 and 4.0, you really end up with the New World style wines. That's for red wine. For white wine, the turning point's at about 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6 gets you into that New World. And our Riesling a lot of times is 2.95, right in there. This rosé is 3.1. And the higher the pH, the faster the wine absorbs alcohol. And so, I got a call from Dan Berger, who's a wine writer, the other day, and he goes, Scott, we're seeing that Napa Valley Cabernets $100 Cabernets aren't selling anymore. People aren't buying them. And I go, well, people who buy $100 wines have cellars, and they're putting them in their cellars, and they want to do a couple of things. They want to brag that they have these expensive wines, so they want to keep them in there for a long time, and they want to hopefully sell them for a lot more money down the road and so forth. But at these 4.0 New World style pHs, which Parker and everybody touts, they might drink okay now, but in 2 or 3 years, especially 5 years, they're gone because they just absorb oxygen way too fast. And so what's happening is these guys, they're opening up these wines they paid a fortune for 4 or 5 years later, and they're all over the hill. And so that's what's happening with the New World wines.
So Dee wants to know, do all the grapes, underripe, overripe, and perfectly ripe, make it into the wine? And I would say, for us, yes. Yes, they all make it into the wine. The big thing we look for is you can see, especially in specific varietals, different types of mildews, and some things like botrytis, stuff that we don't want in our wine, and we do tend to sort that out because we don't want that going in there. But as far as the grapes are concerned, a little imperfection ends up making a much more interesting wine than having uniform grapes going into your fermentation container.
We want a wine that's multidimensional. And one of the things, again, that Napa Valley is doing, which really bothered me, is they're overcropping their vineyards to about 6 tons to the acre, 6 to 8 tons to the acre. And then the winemakers are making the growers drop half the fruit on the ground. And so they go through and they drop, just early or close to harvest, they drop all the overripe in the underripe, and they get this consistent character. And they're producing what I call mono wines. Of course, they let them all get overripe by the time they pick, where I want a wine that has a lot of things going on in it. So we not only want the different ripeness and berries to give you different complexities and make the wine exciting, but we may use different yeast strains, and so we have more dimensions coming from different types of yeast. And if we're fermenting in open top picking bens or macro bens, they hold a half a ton each, we end up with all these different fermentation temperatures, which create different characters in the wine as well. And then when you put that wine back together in the press, you end up with a much more complex wine. And my definition of first growth winemaking is multidimensional. There's a lot of stuff going on in the wine, the positive things going on, rather than just this one character, this monodimensional character.
We end up, even with allowing all of the imperfections into the fermentation, we still end up with a uniform product at the end, which is what we want. We want your first bottle of Barbera to taste like your 8th bottle of Barbera, as long as you're not drinking it up in the same night, because I think at that point you can start to taste the difference, or not. but we want the final product to taste the same bottle to bottle, but we want to have all of that complexity happening early on. We want to be able to have those differences in, like Scott said, in the different fermentation containers and throughout that process. And then as it ages, it starts to meld together into one complex, very interesting wine to drink.
Hopefully.
That's the goal. Let's see. I have a question about Vermentinos, which is a fun varietal. We just started making some Vermentinos this, I think we've done 2 vintages of Vermentino now. One of our wine club exclusive wines. And do we have characteristics of New World versus Old World Vermentino in specifically?
Well, ours is made in the old world style. Again, it's only 11% alcohol, crisp, white wine. No, it's a aroma-rich wine rather than a bouquet-rich wine. Aroma being everything that comes from the vineyard and the variety. Bouquet is everything that comes from the winemaking process. So Riesling is naturally a aroma-rich wine, where a malolactic Chardonnay is a bouquet-rich wine. Since I'm trained in that Riesling style, I tend to want to make aroma-rich whites. And Vermentino is a warm climate white. Amador County is a warm climate region, and dry, mountainous, warm climate region. So it comes traditionally from island off of Italy, Sardinia, and also Cinque Terre in the real mountainous or steep vineyard sites. So Amador County hasn't, until Vermentino and Semillon, I don't think has had a white that works well here. The Muscat works well, but Muscat's not a real easily selling wine. We had a lot of Sauvignon Blanc when Sauvignon Blanc was popular back in the 80s. But then again, to me, it just was picked from a warm climate. It was just white wine. It didn't have those great characters that you get out of where Molly was in New Zealand from Sauvignon Blanc. So I'm excited about Vermentino, and I like Semillon a lot. Some of the best Semillon in the world, I think, comes from the Hunter Valley, which is also a warm climate region, very low alcohol, fresh, crisp white wine. Semillon's another one that's a hard sell. But the Vermentino, of course, we're making small quantities, but it's selling out fine, and it's fun. I like it a lot.
What about Albarino? I, in particular, love Albarino. I worked for a Spanish company in Carneros right after college, and so we grew some Albarino up in the hills there, and Albarino, I think, is such an interesting and fun white wine to make. Scott, what do you think about Albarino coming up to Amador?
I'm worried about the acidity. Albarino tends not to have as much acidity, but all we can do is grow some and see.
Yeah.
Because it is it comes from warmer regions of the world. Yeah.
But I think the world, and particularly, I know more, for me, I know more the California palate than the American palate as a whole, but I know the California palate is looking for those interesting white wines. And so I think producing some old world style white wines like we do with our Vermentino and our Riesling and our Sauvignon Blancs and even our Rosé of Barbera, I think California is, pardon the pun, ripe for the picking, that we're ready for some really interesting white wines, and particularly the white wines that we produce in kind of our style, the old world style, I think we're seeing an uptick in interest in those kind of wines.
We have any more questions?
So if there aren't any more questions, I guess we can say thank you all for joining with us again today. I think a lot of you are repeats. So, and we always offer a special, as appreciation for having you join us at our virtual experiences. So this, for this one, it's World 30. I know a lot of you have already taken advantage of it, and we really appreciate that. But entering World 30 in your, if you place an order, that'll give you a 30% discount with free shipping. So,
yeah, if you go either to our website, scottharveywines.com, or you can give us a call at the winery. We've got somebody there pretty much every day answering phone calls, and if you use that code WORLD30, and we'll give you that 30% off and free shipping. And then as far as upcoming events, Jana, do you have that list in front of you of our next couple of virtual tastings that we've got going on?
Well, we have one with the chef on, what night? Chef, where are you?
Wednesday?
It's Wednesday, and it's wine and food pairing. Yes, Wednesday at 5:30, I believe.
So that'll be fun. And then
on Saturday we have at 4:30 in celebration of the Sauvignon Blanc. It's International Sauvignon Blanc Day. We are going to taste Sauvignon Blancs around the world, and we mentioned a few areas already today.
That we'll be revisiting.
Pardon?
We'll be revisiting some of those regions.
Yeah. How do people get the code to log in?
Through the website. If you go to, they're not up quite yet, but I think they'll be up in the next day or so. I do know that the pairing, Food and Wine Pairing 101 is up currently on our website. But in the next day or two, look for all of our May events to be coming up. And so if you go to scottharveywines.com, click on our events page, or I believe it's Visit Us and then Events, and scroll down, you'll see each individual one listed. And if you click on the register button there, it will take you to the invitation where you can register for each individual one. I know we've got one next Tuesday, which I'm excited about, is Wine with Mexican Food, because it's Cinco de Mayo, and it's Taco Tuesday and Cinco de Mayo all in one day. So we're gonna show you a little bit about pairing Mexican food with wine instead of margaritas. So I'm looking forward to that one for sure.
Great.
Well, thank you all again.
Yep. Thanks for coming. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.
It was go. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That
Bye-bye.
was great. Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
Have a good one.